A security consultant in Texas posted something last year in a professional forum that I've thought about more than once since reading it. He wrote that in 14 years of residential security assessments across hundreds of properties, he had seen motion sensors fail, alarm companies take 12 minutes to respond, and cameras that recorded everything and stopped nothing. He wrote that the single most effective deterrent he had ever documented wasn't a system. It was a 120-pound Rottweiler standing in a dark hallway at 2 a.m. The intruder didn't run, he froze, and then, very slowly, he backed out the same window he'd entered. The dog never barked. It never moved. It just stood there, watching him leave. The consultant said he had never seen a person make that calculation so fast. I think about that post when people ask me about Rottweilers for protection, because most of the conversation around this breed misses what actually matters. People focus on the bite force. 328 psi is real, it's significant, it's among the higher figures recorded in domestic dogs. But bite force is the last thing a properly trained Rottweiler uses in a real scenario. The performance, the barking, the dramatic display that happens in daylight, with strangers at the fence, with people who need to be warned off from a distance. At 2 a.m., when someone has already made a decision and is inside your home, a dog that knows what it's doing goes quiet in a way that's hard to describe unless you've been near it. Not still in the way a tired dog is still in the way a person gets right before something irreversible happens. The Rottweiler is not a recent breed, and it was not built for sport. Roman legions drove cattle across the Alps with dogs that needed to be large enough to control livestock, resilient enough to cover thousands of miles of terrain, and stable enough to work in the middle of chaos without breaking. The town of Rottweil in southern Germany became a center of the cattle trade in the Middle Ages, and the butchers there kept those dogs to drive livestock to market and carry money home in leather pouches around their necks. For centuries, the Rottweiler's entire job description was to be reliable, strong, and unshakable in environments that would overwhelm most dogs. Males run 95 to 135 pounds. The build is compact for the weight, substantial without being slow. They were used by the German military and police in both world wars. The qualities that made them useful then, nerve, drive, and the capacity to follow complex commands under sustained stress, are the same qualities that define the working lines today. Here's the thing most people skip when they talk about Rottweilers as protection animals. Size doesn't decide what happens at 2 a.m. Nerve does. In working dog terminology, nerve describes a dog's psychological stability under pressure. A dog with poor nerve will posture, bark, make a show of it, and then when something actually pushes back, it retreats, deflects, or shuts down entirely. A dog with solid nerve does the opposite. Pressure resolves it rather than breaking it. The more committed the threat, the more fixed the dog becomes. That distinction is everything in a real situation. And it's the thing that separates a Rottweiler bred for work from one bred for appearance. Because those are not the same animal, and they haven't been for a long time. The Rottweiler's reputation has been its curse. As the breed became associated with protection work, demand grew faster than responsible breeding could supply it. Breeders who understood working temperament, who knew what nerve looked like in an 8-week-old puppy, couldn't meet the market. Breeders who didn't understand it and didn't care filled the gap. The result is a Rottweiler population now split in a way that matters enormously if you're serious about this breed for protection. Trainers who evaluate working dogs professionally will tell you they can assess a Rottweiler's psychological foundation inside of a few minutes. The number that passed that evaluation at the standard required for real protection work is not high. Sourcing is the whole conversation, not an afterthought. What actually happens when a properly conditioned Rottweiler detects an intruder at 2 a.m.? The first response, assuming the dog was alert, and a properly conditioned Rottweiler is almost always alert inside the home at night, is location and assessment. This happens fast. Faster than people expect from a dog of this size. Rottweilers at full speed cover ground in a way that leaves very little reaction time for a person, but a trained dog doesn't immediately cover that distance. It locates. It positions. A well-trained protection dog understands that controlling space is the first objective, not contact. It places itself between the threat and what it's protecting. It makes itself unavoidable. The communication that follows is almost entirely physical. Stance, eye contact. A low vocalization that isn't a bark and isn't quite a growl. Something older than both. The dog knows the person is there, knows exactly where they are, and has already made a decision about what happens next. Most people who break into homes are not professionals. They plan around empty houses, slow response times, and the assumption that if something goes wrong, they can leave the way they came in. A 120-pound dog standing between them and the exit, absolutely still, in the dark at 2 a.m., that calculation doesn't take long to resolve. Something ancient in the human nervous system answers to a dog like this in ways that bypass rational thought entirely. And in the best case, and I'll say directly that this is the best case, the person leaves. No bite thrown, no contact made. The threat resolves itself because the dog's presence alone made the cost of staying unthinkable. The violence is the failure mode. The resolution is when the threat walks back out the window. What surprises people who spend time around Rottweilers is how different the two modes are. Within the family unit, these dogs are patient in a way that seems almost counterintuitive, given everything else about them. Calm with children, tolerant of noise, not easily rattled by the ordinary chaos of a house being lived in. A trainer I spoke to who works exclusively with working breeds described it this way: the Rottweiler doesn't exist in one mode or the other. It runs both simultaneously. And the switch, from the dog lying in the kitchen to the dog standing in a dark hallway at 2 a.m. with every muscle fixed and its full attention locked onto something that doesn't belong, is instantaneous, in a way that still surprises people who've owned the breed for years. The security consultant who wrote that post never found out why the intruder chose that house. He doesn't know if the man had a weapon. Doesn't know how far inside he'd gotten before the Rottweiler met him in the hallway. The homeowner had been asleep. He didn't hear the window. He didn't hear footsteps. He heard nothing until the sound of someone moving very quickly back the way they came. By the time he was fully awake, the dog was already back at the bedroom door, lying down, settled, watching the hallway. He said that when he put his hand on the dog's side in the dark, the breathing was completely normal, as though it had done something routine, as though this was exactly what it had always been for.